Thank you all very much. And I've never been accused of being quiet, so I may get a little loud here in a minute. But for the purposes of our meditation today, I invite you all to join me for a moment in silent meditation. And if you feel comfortable, please close your eyes. If you feel more comfortable leaving them open, just gaze a few feet in front of you with a soft stare. Assume a comfortable posture. And the first thing that we always do when we meditate is we take 3 deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Again, feel the spine straighten. Feel the body relax. One more time. And now simply sit and know that you're sitting. First, notice the sensations in your feet. Don't think about the sensations, but rather feel them. Feel the way the shoes hug your foot. The way your foot is flat against the ground. And then slowly begin to follow that feeling and sensation up your legs, noticing your calves, maybe socks, or temperature if your skin is exposed. Going towards your calves, your shins, your knees, your thighs, your hamstrings, noticing the weight of your body against the chair. Notice your back, starting at your lower back, spreading out towards your upper back. Now turn your attention towards your belly. If you're holding your belly in with tension, let it go. We want nice, soft bellies. Notice your chest. Notice how it still rises and falls with the breath, but less so since you're breathing with your belly. Now notice your head. Some of you may have forgotten you had a head. Notice the top of your scalp, around the eyes, the temples, the cheeks, softening any tension that's being held there. And now notice your right shoulder, right bicep, right tricep, right forearm, and down each individual finger of the right hand. And as you do so, you might notice tingling or movement, sensations in your fingertips. Just be aware of them. And now turn your attention to your left shoulder, left bicep, left tricep, left forearm, and down each individual finger of the left hand. And now finally turn your attention to your breath. Breathing in and out through the nostrils. The first thing I want you to notice is notice the temperature as you breathe in. Notice how it's a little cool. And also notice that you don't have to do anything to experience that coolness. It just appears in your sensations. And when you breathe out, notice how the warm air flows out your nostrils. And now notice the length of the breath. Not controlling the breath, but investigating the breath. Is it a short breath, middle breath, long, calming breath? Calming breath. And before we begin today, the one thing I would like you to ask yourself now is, if this were your last day on earth, and you were here right now, how would you want to approach this moment? May you all be well, happy, successful, and peaceful. Slowly open your eyes. So thank you all for that. The way I typically speak is rather emphatic and loud, so it'll be quite the juxtaposition to that meditation just now. I will also apologize because my wife, in spite of the fact that I'm a politician and lawyer, is actually the speaker of the family. So I apologize if I'm not as entertaining as she is. But my name is Collin Walke, and I've been a meditation and mindfulness practitioner for about 20 years. I've spent the last 10 years studying under my teacher. His name's Bhante Paratna. He's a Sri Lankan monk, and he has been a monk since he was 11. So it's quite a different experience listening to him talk versus some of the Western teachers, to hear his perspectives on things. And I was elected to the House of Representatives in 2016, and when I was first elected, I thought that my job, in spite of the fact that I was a Buddhist, was to go in there and punch every single Republican in the face, every chance that I got. And it worked for a little bit, and it was fun sometimes. But there was an incident that really got me to thinking. Who in here remembers the teacher walkout from 2017? Yeah, pretty much everybody does. So I got elected in 16. I came in with $1 billion budget deficit, and it was a stressful time because we were talking about what services we needed to cut, whether that was educational services or services for individuals with disabilities. To put it quite frankly, it was a very tough time to be in office. And so during the teacher walkout, I'll never forget, there was a Republican, and you can see this image on the internet, there was a Republican who stood up and he called the Democratic caucus a bunch of liars. He said the only reason we were doing what we were doing was because we were putting on a show for all of the teachers in the gallery. And this caused great offense to me because that's not why I was doing what I was doing. And as a matter of fact, he had accused us of lying because he said not a single Democrat had voted to increase the cigarette tax in the state of Oklahoma, which was one of the big issues at the time. And I disagreed because I pushed the green button in favor of that cigarette tax. And so I stood up and challenged this Republican to a fight on the House floor, and it actually resulted in the House sergeants and other members trying to separate us at the back of the House. And so I got a rousing round of applause at that, right? And that's how you know you do a good job as a representative. Except if you're doing as a good job as a representative, it doesn't inherently mean you're doing a good job as a human being. And I was actually quite ashamed at my behavior, because that behavior was completely contradictory to the way I view my life and the way I want to live my life and the way I want to set an example for others to live their lives. And so I started thinking, well, how could I address this? So I decided I was going to write a book called Right Speech, which, as previously noted, is one of the 8 paths of the Noble Eightfold Path. And so I had reached out to a few people and I said, hey, what do you think about publishing a book I'm going to write called Right Speech? And these were people who had already had published books by like Random House and Penguin. And they all said, Walke, if you're going to publish a book on Buddhism, you might as well shut up and write it yourself. So that's what I did, because nobody wants to publish a book on Buddhism, typically speaking. So that's how you ended up with this book in front of you today. But one of the things that I found really important while writing this book and talking about this book is what I call irony when it comes to speech. Because by the end of this, I hope that instead of you walking away more solidified in your own positions, more confident in your own positions, that you actually walk away more skeptical of your own positions. Because there have been times where I have given this type of talk about right speech to other individuals, and then afterwards, inevitably, people will come up to me and go, yeah, those Republicans are really stupid, aren't they? And I'm like, did you listen to anything I said for the last 30 minutes? Probably not, right? So let me start with the inspiration for this book. And this comes from one of the Buddha's sutras. Those who speak with quarrelsome intent, settled in their opinions, swollen with pride, ignoble, having assailed virtues, look for openings to attack one another. They mutually delight when their opponent speaks badly and makes a mistake. Who in here has ever liked it or laughed at somebody who's made a mistake that they don't like, right? Yeah. They rejoice in his bewilderment and defeat, but noble ones don't engage in such talk. If a wise person wants to talk, having known the time is right, without quarrelsome or pride, the sagely person should utter the speech that the noble ones practice, which is connected with the teachings, not being insolent or aggressive, with a mind not elated. He speaks free from envy on the basis of right knowledge. He should approve of what is well expressed, but should not attack what is badly stated. He should not train in fault finding, nor seize on the other's mistakes. He should not overwhelm and crush his opponent, nor speak with mendacious words. Truly, a discussion among the good is for the sake of knowledge and confidence. Such is the way the nobles discuss things. This is the discussion of the noble ones. Having understood this, the wise person should not swell up, but should discuss things. Almost every line in that applies to me. And I bet you applies to each and every one of you. Because whether you're a lawyer or just a really passionate advocate for what you believe in, we always raise our tempers. We always get more engaged in the situation, more focused on what we're saying than what the other side is saying. We're not doing a good job of being mindful listeners. And that's really where I think the first step of this begins, is being a mindful listener. Because what are the three components to right speech? The three components are, is what you're about to say the right time? Is what you're about to say true? And is what you're about to say beneficial? Now, I'm confident that all of us can think of circumstances where we've been speaking with someone that we love, a friend, or even someone we don't like, and we said something, but one of those three things was missing, right? Like just the other day, I was having a conversation with my wife at breakfast over something that it was not the right time to have that conversation about, and it went south, okay? But in order to ask those three questions of yourself, you must be mindful in the first place. And that's where I think we have to go back for 1 second about the distinctions between meditation and mindfulness. And this is the way I make those comparisons. Mindfulness is knowing what you're doing while you're doing it. And so right now, as you sit here, you should be mindful of whether you're on your in-breath or your out-breath. That's the ultimate goal, not to be a good meditator. What does it matter if you can sit and meditate well for 20 seconds? It's what you do off of the cushion that matters. So then what is meditation? What's the point of meditation? Well, meditation is like the batting cages. Batting cages are a way for you to learn how to hit the ball correctly because the ball is coming at you in a predictable fashion so that you can work on your form. So in the game of life, you go out there and hit the ball better. The same thing here. Meditation is the batting cages. That's why we go to a quiet place. We limit the sensory input that we have so that we can work on our form, so that when we get off of the meditation cushion, we go out into the real world mindfully acting differently than we do today. So that's one of the key points, is you have to be mindful. You have to practice meditation and mindfulness in order to ask these three questions in the first place. So let's start with the first question. Is it true? Because that's usually the hardest one. How many of you in here have engaged in some sort of debate with somebody saying that's not true? Everybody? And how many times has the other side said, yeah, it is, yeah, right? And then we all go to our various sources and we get our different statistics and then we just go, whatever, right? Like it ends up going nowhere. right? And I think that's because people misunderstand what the point of asking the question, is it true, is all about. So I'm going to quote the novelist James Baldwin, who said, "The point of art is to lay bare the questions that have been hidden by the answers." Let's say that again. The purpose of art is to lay bare the questions that have been hidden by the answers. The art isn't the answers, it's the questions. And the Buddha, if you go back and you read his sutras, every time that he's talking, he's speaking in questions. He's asking questions of the individuals, just like Socrates, just like Jesus, because questions are how we get to the truth of the matter. That's why lawyers ask questions in depositions, in discovery, in that trial, because questions get us to the truth. So my first suggestion is when you're asking yourself, is it true? You should not only be asking, is what the other side is saying true, but is what you are saying true, right? And not only that, but when you are speaking with this other person, instead of speaking in declarative sentences, why not ask questions? If you're so confident in your position, you ought not to feel as though you have to speak, because you have truth and righteousness and correctness on your side. So you should feel as though you ought to be able to ask this person the keys to discover the truth on their own, right? Help them become enlightened, like Socrates did, like the Buddha did, like Jesus did. Ask those questions. So that's how you know if something is true. You've got to ask yourself those questions. And is something beneficial is also equally the same. You ask questions to find out whether it's beneficial. But you also have to appreciate context. Because what's beneficial to you today is likely not beneficial for you 20 years from now, and vice versa, right? And that's another reason why I wanted to write this book, because in the day and age of social media and the internet, every single thing that you put up there is going to be there for the rest of your life. Whether you like it or not, whether you think it's deleted or not, it's going to remain there. And that's a reflection of who you are today into the future. Your context may have changed, but whatever you said will be stuck there forever. And so we have to learn to forgive individuals for what they have done in the past. Even if they acted for something they thought was beneficial at the time, right, turned out to be wrong, we as a society and a community have to learn how to forgive these people. There's a great book out there right now called The Shame Machine. And it's by Dr. Kathy O'Neill from Harvard, and she audits algorithms by bias. And one of her points in this book, it's in the opening part of this book, is that in certain Native American traditions, individuals are publicly shamed at ceremonies. Now, the reason why is because these ceremonies and this public shaming is an opportunity for the community to shame an individual in a constructive way to get them to change their behavior and be brought back within the community. What we lack in today's culture and today's society is the way to allow those individuals who we call canceled to come back into the fold. And what that does is it breeds resentment, anger, distrust, and it solidifies those individuals in their prior views, because if you're not willing to take me back, I might as well dig in on what I believe, right? So we as a community have to learn that being beneficial includes recognizing contexts in situations. The final question that you have to ask yourself is it the right time? And this one is always really, really tricky, right? Not just because you don't know what that other person's mood is, you don't know how that other person feels, but it's also tricky because how much time do you have? So one of the stories that I talk about in this book happened to me while I was on the campaign trail. And it was during 2016, and I was knocking on a door, and this guy comes to the door, and he has this golf shirt on that says OCPA. Now, anybody involved in Oklahoma politics knows that OCPA stands for the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs, a very, very conservative organization that, for example, supports things like school vouchers, that supports things like anti-taxes on big oil, those sorts of things, right? Not exactly my favorite cup of tea. But for whatever reason, I had a brain fart at the moment while I was on the door, and when I saw that, I went, oh, Oklahoma certified public accountant, right?
Oops.
So he comes out, and his first question to me is oh, okay, so you're all for public schools, right? Yeah. What's the average per pupil expenditure for somebody in public schools for a student? And I said, well, it's been a while since I checked because I ran in 2014 and I lost, so it's been 2 years since I looked, but I said it's roughly $4,500. And he goes, you're wrong. Man, he got angry. You're wrong. It's $12,500. You're running for office and you don't even know how much the per pupil expenditure is? And I mean, I thought, I'm going to have to fight this gentleman on his front porch, right? I mean, it was just astounding. So I quickly realized this was not a door I needed to remain on for very long. And so I stepped away and said, appreciate it, we're going to have to disagree and walk away. What I later came to find out was that this gentleman's assertion wasn't entirely insane. The difference was I was looking at dollars going into the classroom. He was looking at not just dollars going into the classroom, but any type of expenditure, even, for example, on public school buildings. So if you take into effect all of the bond projects and dollars going in to fulfill these actual fixed cost infrastructure needs, well, you're right. Then it's $12,500. But no one cares if there's a school building. People care, what are the teachers doing? What are the resources doing? What do our kids actually have to work with? That's the difference. And the beauty is in the 21st century, had that gentleman been a little bit more polite and a little bit more kind, we probably could have figured out via some quick Google searches where we each got our numbers. But we didn't have the amount of time standing there on the porch to have that conversation. And part of the reason we didn't have the time was because of his attitude, right? And that's one of the things that I think is very important for us to realize. We cannot change every single mind in the world. And there's, for example, for those of you in the room that are Buddhists, you're aware of the fact that Mahayana Buddhism, there's a vow that you make that you will not reach enlightenment until everyone else in the world reaches enlightenment, right? Which we all acknowledge, and the point of that is, it's an impossible task. Even Jesus said, the poor shall always be with you. I think it is a utopic fantasy for us to think in the real world, we're going to get everybody on our page. So how do we deal with that? Well, for those of you who may be familiar with what's known as metta, loving kindness meditation, that's a situation where you sit there and you wish good thoughts for another person, with the hope that you are internalizing that yourself so that you can develop good thoughts for those other people, right? But there's a famous story where there was a meditation teacher and he was sitting in Thailand and he went into his hut one day and this snake came into the hut. Now, snakes and humans ain't supposed to be together. And the monk was like, hey, snake, I'm supposed to kill you and you want to eat me, so perhaps we should go our separate ways. And the snake just hung around, and it made the monk even more nervous as the days went on. He finally said, I've got to get rid of this snake somehow. So he sat down and he did a loving kindness meditation. And he said, snake, I'm a human being. I'm supposed to kill you, but I don't want to hurt you because I took these vows. And you're supposed to eat me, but you're doing no good. You're going to starve to death if you stay in here. Go out and get some food somewhere else. He opens his eyes, and sure enough, the snake slithers out. Now, what's the point of that story? The point of that story is that loving kindness doesn't mean that you have to be together. It's that sometimes the best thing for everyone involved is for you to actually be apart, both for your own sanity and the sanity of the other people around you. And so I think that it is something important for us to learn. And in that keeping, or in that vein, there's something else that I would like to say, and this goes back to my point earlier, where I had said that, and I'll shut up here in a second because I know my time is short, but I said earlier that, sometimes I walk out of here and people immediately go, yeah, the stupid Republicans, stupid Kevin Stitt, whatever it might be, right? And I don't mean to be picking on Republicans. My wife used to be a Republican, so it's not that. It's just the general trend of things. So, and the thing is this is what I want you to remember. These are the words from the Buddha, quote unquote, from himself. Monks do not wage wordy warfare, saying, you don't understand the teachings. I understand the teachings. How could you understand it? You have fallen into wrong practices. I have the right practice. You have said afterwards what you should have said at first.
And you have said first what you should have said afterwards. What I say is consistent. What you say isn't. What you have thought out for so long is entirely reversed. Your statement is refuted. You are talking rubbish. You are in the wrong. Get out of that if you can. Why should you not do this? Such talk, monks, is not related to the goal. It is not fundamental or conducive to the holy life. It does not create disenchantment. It does not create dispassion. It does not create cessation, tranquility, higher knowledge, enlightenment, or nirvana. When you have discussion, monks, you should discuss suffering, the arising of suffering, its cessation, and the path that leads to the cessation of that suffering. So the next time that you find yourself in a situation where you feel you may have to go your separate ways from your counterpart across the table from you, instead of engaging in wordy warfare, find out how that person is suffering. Talk to them about your suffering. Realize that we are all individuals with our foot caught in a trap, trying to avoid pain and trying to find happiness. Everyone can relate to that. And talking about wise speech, suffering, and the cessation of suffering is always an appropriate topic. So thank you all very much for the time this morning. I appreciate it.